It is now official and I bought out my WRX. This beauty was on a lease for 2 years and I've been enjoying it and providing you with some videos of it and my impressions and so on. And finally I've made the decision to buy out the car. While it's on a lease, it's kind of like joint ownership between you and the manufacturer. And I made the choice to make it completely my own. And let's talk about it. Let's go for a drive and I'll give you the reasons why I did that, what were some of my other options, and ultimately why I think that's the best decision for me. So this car I've had for about a year and a half, or just over, maybe a year and 8 months or so, and it was a 24-month lease, a 2-year lease that the car was on. And so, as you can see, it's a bit premature. It's before the end of the lease that I'm buying it out. Just make sure there's no one here. Great. All right, so yeah, with this vehicle at the end of the lease, there was a residual value, and that residual value was about 30,000. That's Canadian dollars, so about what, 22 or 23 US. And I thought that that was a very good value for the car, for the WRX. The new 2024s, an equivalent trim level for 2024 would be $40,000. So it would be over 30% more expensive to buy a brand new than to buy out this vehicle. I've got 27,000 K on it. And so the kilometers are fairly low, and I also know that the retail value of the car is above that residual value, and in fact that residual value is about in line with what the wholesale value for the car is. And what that means is that in the case, well, it shows that there's good value in the vehicle at that buyout value of $30,000. Because the wholesale value being equivalent means that if a dealer or someone that's trying to, buy the car very cheaply under market would be still be offering the amount that cost me to buy the car. So from a financial safety perspective, I should say, this is all financial. From that perspective, it's very safe. If I want to let go of the car or make a change down the road, really my only expenditure would have been the tax that is paid on the buyout value. And that changes state to state, province to province. In my case, it's 12%. So it's definitely not a small amount, but I am very confident in me wanting to have the car and keep it for a long time. So it made sense to me. In my case, I do want to keep the car for a while. So this financial calculation of what the car is worth, that's really just kind of like a last resort, and that's something that I think I would need to resort to, but it's always a good idea to do this calculation to make sure that you're not getting yourself into trouble, you're not getting yourself into a vehicle that depreciates very quickly. So some vehicles, for example, the actual value or the dealer's wholesale value maybe less than the residual. In many vehicles it's like that. And if that's the case for you, you might not want to buy out your vehicle. Now there's other factors as well, such as just the fact that you've been owning this vehicle, not someone else. So there's a little less risk there, and maybe that's worth paying a bit more. But if you're seeing used cars similar to the car that your car that you want to buy out, going for less than the residual value of your car, then it just won't feel like a great deal. Likely you won't do it, and you might be tempted to look at a new car if that's the case. And that sometimes does happen with, not to name names, but BMW, brands like these luxury brands where they're often leased and they depreciate, and they're somewhat subsidized by the manufacturer that way to be leased, because they are expensive, but this way they get sold. Subaru is different, of course. So Subarus start very reasonably in terms of the price, and often the residual value is higher compared to other manufacturers as a percentage of the cost of the car. And what that means is that your lease, especially when interest rates are low, I don't know if we'll get there again, but they used to be low, and if they're ever low again, the lease cost would be very affordable. It would be very small compared to financing the car, let's say. That's when the residual values are high, so that's the benefit there. Now, of course, that will become sort of a disadvantage at the end of the lease when you're trying to buy out the lease if the residual value is high, because you want as good of a deal as possible on buying out the car, and if the residual value is high, that will not feel like a good deal. With Subarus, while the residual value is high, the cars also keep their market value really, really well. So often you'll find that the lease is a good deal, and then especially with inflation a few years down the road, when it comes time to buy out the car, it often feels like a good deal as well. And this brings me back to my car and my reasoning. And this is a unique situation, not unique to me, but unique to in this time in history, where we have high interest rates. Now, they're not historically high. In the 80s, I think it was the 80s, I wasn't around then, but in the 80s, I hear, there were quite high interest rates, even higher than today's. The difference is that today's interest rates have risen very, very quickly, quicker than they did in the past and in the 80s. So we really, really feel it. But anyhow, with high interest rates, the cost of lease is really affected. That is because the car is still fully financed. The entire cost of the car, the entire price of the car is financed when you do a lease. But you're only considering sort of a portion of that. But you're still paying all of the interest on the entire cost of the car. So that's why if you're leasing the car and interest rates are high, you're really gonna feel it, even if the residual value is high. Where in low interest rate environments, your payment might be X amount, and then with the residual being the same, but just the interest rates increasing 5% or so, you could easily see your payments on a lease go up by something like $200 or so, and or let's say $150 a month, very easily. And that's exactly what we have happening now. And when I consider whether I stick to my lease and go for a new lease, and I look at the new lease prices, we're contending with two things. They're so much higher than they were in the past. for me to lease this vehicle seemed like a great deal. Payments were low. And now, of course, I work for Subaru, and as some of you may know, but regardless whether it's sort of an employee deal or not, the rates were very, very good. The lease monthly prices for these WRXs in 2022 were phenomenal, like around the $300 to $400 Canadian for a base model, and not much more up from there for a sport trim level. And even Sportec was priced, the top of the line was priced kind of about where we are now for a base model 2024 WRX. We're contending with two things. A, the price of the cars has gone up quite a bit. In just 2 years, the price has gone up about 10%. Actually, not about 10%, exactly 10%. Now, we have had this wave of inflation over the last 2 years, and many manufacturers have increased their price even more. Subaru is not to blame. No one in particular is to blame. It's just a part of our monetary system, and that's what's happening. In fact, Subaru has raised their prices the least, or is one of the least out of the main manufacturers. But anyhow, so now the price of the car is 10% more, so you'd expect the cost of the lease to be 10% more, and interest rates have risen, and that's the real factor that increases the cost of the lease. While it might not, it still makes a big difference for financing a vehicle, but on a lease, it makes even a higher, even more of a difference to increasing the lease payments. So that did cause the lease payments now to go up quite high. And in considering my options, if I look at a new one, it just does not make sense. I'm looking at a couple $100 more, or $150 more than what I'm paying now. Now again, this situation really is unique to this WRX, that particular lease versus the current situation. Many vehicles are different. For example, Subaru Crosstreks hold their value better than this car for that year anyways, and the lease rates are still better on Crosstreks, and so there's equity in previous leases, and that can be used towards getting a much better deal on a new Crosstrek. So not all Subarus and not all vehicles are in a similar situation as mine. I'm not saying go out and buy your lease, not at all. In fact, for many cars, especially Crosstreks, let's say Subaru Crosstreks, Subaru Foresters, those who have kept really good value over the last few years, there you should explore, unless you have made your decision because of other factors to buy out the car, but financially you could still get a very good deal on leasing a 2024 WRX or a Crosstrek if you're a current Crosstrek leasee. But anyways, for me it wasn't the case, and in fact, when I did my calculations, a 3-year lease on a new WRX would be about the same, and at least not much less, than financing this residual value for my current car for a 6-year term. So of course it's not exactly apples to apples, and in my case I'm talking about a 6-year financing term versus a 3-year lease. So the commitment is quite a bit less, but with the payments being similar, and of course vehicles depreciate in value, but for a vehicle like this I'm quite comfortable with the value of it keeping up and so on, and I'm just very comfortable with the car. And so I almost see it as the dilemma between renting and owning a house or an apartment, difference between a mortgage and rent, and knowing that I want to keep this car for the long term, and I can see myself with this car, having a cool sporty car for years and years. I mean, I don't really see a reason to rid of it unless, financially something becomes very, very painful. That's why I did that calculation that I mentioned at first, with potentially letting go of the car if I need to. But of course, that's not plan A. And in fact, I continue to see myself just driving and enjoying this car, really for the next 10 years and even more. Honestly, it mainly depends about like having space for it. That's mainly it. And I do plan on keeping this vehicle with lower kilometers now that I bought it out. And to do that, I bought a secondary car, a cheaper old Outback, which I'll also show. Actually, I did a review on it. It's a 2001 Outback. It's just an oldie but a goodie, and it's much better on gas than this thing. I don't have to worry about scratches and so on. And also, more importantly, it's a car. It's an SUV, so it's a car that I can take out for camping and sleep in the car and really take it on forestry roads, which I'm not gonna do that with a WRX. I was gonna say I can't do it, but yes, the car can, but I won't. So that's why I got that secondary car. So again, this is kind of like the more expensive car. The Outback would be a secondary car. I'll be using the Outback to keep the mileage on this low and try to keep this for as long as possible. That would be the idea there. So that's the reasoning behind me buying out the car from the lease. And of course, if you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, well, leasing to begin with is a waste of time, and then financing is also a waste of time, and it means you can't afford the car and so on, then there's not much to be said there. If you can afford the car in cash, or you want to wait till you can afford the vehicle in cash, that's probably the best way to do it. Actually, for sure, the best way to do it financially. I'm in a different position, and I think that if you echo what I'm saying, maybe you're in a similar camp to me, and maybe it's justified for yourself as well. But just like anything, we spend money where we see fit. And for me, the car is a bit more than just transport. Actually, quite a bit more for me. I've always really enjoyed the manual transmission. And I don't know how long it's gonna be that Subaru will be making these, or other manufacturers will be making these. A turbo manual all-wheel drive gas car is a pretty unique proposition. And so for me, this is almost it's an asset, not quite a collector item, but it's just an asset, something very cool, and it is unique, and something fun for me. So it's very much for me, it's about the experience of driving, switching the gears, listening to the engine, listening to the mechanical components, and enjoying the ride that way. This car has also a ton of conveniences. Harman Kardon sound system. I guess that's more of a luxury, but the sound system here is great. So it's just really nice to have that music. So the car provides me with more than just that A to B transportation. It also is helpful to me, and through my channel, I featured it as well. And so I think you could say that it's kind of a passion. And other than that, I just figure that either way, I would need to have a car anyway. So this would be kind of a cool way to combine the sporty car aspect, buying out the car at a residual value that I feel is a pretty good deal. And of course, it could seem extravagant, but this is $30,000 plus 12% tax. I didn't think it was too bad, so I just went ahead and pulled the trigger. So thanks for listening to my rant, and I hope you enjoyed the drive through beautiful Vancouver. Looks like there's a cop right behind me, hopefully not for me. All right, now that that's over, well, I guess it's not over, but we'll continue to drive around. But that's basically the conclusion to my rant, and that's my reasoning for buying out the car. Now, just again, going back to the financial thing, there's definitely an argument for, buying cars in cash and just upgrading as you can. And I did that for a while, first driving very cheap cars, doing the repairs as necessary, $1,000 cars, $2,000 cars, $5,000 cars. But the issue really is, and this is a point that's kind of separate from, your outlook on buying out a lease specifically or financing, but just the fact that, inflation plays a very big role in our lives. And I think as we go on, it will continue to play more and more of a role, more and more of a prominent role for all of us. At the end of the decade, just think to yourself what a new WRX would cost. They were 37 plus tax a couple of years ago. Now they're 40,000 plus tax Canadian for this model, and by the end of the decade, probably 50. And what that means is that, of course, it's really nice not to have any debt, not to owe anyone anything, and be sort of free and responsible, build up savings, and then buying out the vehicles in cash. But there, I think, is an argument there that if you take inflation into account, it's not a bad idea if you can find a car that you feel is a good deal to finance it, and at least have those monthly payments that will eventually, with inflation, will seem to grow smaller and smaller. They'll stay the same, but likely with inflation, other expenses will grow. It will become better and better of a deal, and hopefully your wage, also our wages, go up over that time, and it will seem better and better that way as well. And what I found out specifically when I was saving for vehicles is that the price of vehicles have just been running away, and it just seems like the car that you could get for a decently good deal for 25,000 5 years ago, if it took you a few years to save up that money, that vehicle might be 35,000 now, or 32,000, or 33,000. So your savings are eroded, and cars are not cheap. And if you're talking about something that's a bit newer, and you're the average person, the saving, when you count for inflation, might really take you time to get there, and maybe quite a bit longer than you expect. If you're thinking about buying a $25,000 car now, if it's $35,000 5 years down the road, you'd still be $10,000 short, plus the tax on that. So that's just one last point. And of course, people have different views, and this is just my view. And please don't take it personally. And I'm not too hard on this view, and I bet that if you were disagreeing with me and you showed me your own personal situation and what you're doing, I'm sure I would see merit in your argument too, and maybe agree with you. And I'd say that in many other situations, I would just continue to buy cars in cash, and upgrading, you know, a $2,000 car to a $5,000 car to 10, 15 as you make more and more money. It's not the easiest thing to do because of maintenance and depreciation and things like that, but it is definitely possible, and probably the most prudent way financially for someone to go about. But if you have a passion around the car, or I don't know, something to do with your job, or some other joy that it really gives you, you know, you could also treat it as sort of a hobby, especially if you're not extravagant, I think, in other areas of your life, other expenditures in your life. All right, I'll end the rant here. This is why I bought out my leased 22 WRX. If you have any questions, just leave it in the comments. See you in the next one, and maybe I'll release more videos of this format. Let me know what you think. Cheers.